Good afternoon. My name is Henry Keane, and UATV obviously is online and on air, even maybe. My dear friend Arthur Ray is with us tonight, and Professor Darren Gerdes. Say that for me, please, Professor.
Gerdes.
Again?
Gerdes.
Gerdes. Right. So let's start with Estonia. Well, topics. I'll just hover around over the topics. Speaker Johnson demands Zelensky remove Ukraine's ambassador to United States after Pennsylvania visit. That's first. Trump is about to meet Zelensky, or Zelensky is about to meet Trump. Kremlin says changes in Russia nuclear doctrine are intended as warning to the West. And Estonia. Today, our long-range strike... No. I know what I am going to... You know what, Arthur? I'm going to just read that, and you... that's a test for you, if it will. And you just say the name who said it. Is that okay?
I don't know who said it.
You just spoiled it all, but let's try it anyway. This is a huge change. This is a huge change. This is the change that the war in Ukraine brought to many NATO allies. We can no longer wait to be hit over the head with a sledgehammer, but we have to be the first to be able to do certain things. Vau Karos, or how do you pronounce that name?
I didn't even understand which name is it, but I think
All
you're
right,
talking about the strike that Estonia is supposed to make, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. We're more thinking about that we should have the capability to destroy all Russian offensive capabilities before they cross our border. So we wouldn't start attacking Russia preemptively, but if they do anything to threaten our independence,
right,
we can take out their assets before they cross our land. That's the whole goal.
But it says clearly here that, well, Professor, a question to you, since I know that professors, can be in sociology and management, but professors know all the things. I know that for sure. So please educate me. What if Estonia will just strike Russian forces on Russian turf, a NATO country? What do you think is going to happen in terms of global political management? Let's speculate on this matter.
So first, I haven't seen any indication that any NATO country, now Estonia might be the one that would be willing to do this, would be willing to actually stand up, given all the incursions that have happened, all the testing of the borders.
Right.
What was it? Was it Poland that escorted a drone, but didn't shoot it down?
I believe so, right.
So you're only begging Putin to do more when you do that sort of thing. So bullies universally don't tend to attack strength. They tend to attack weakness. So when they sense weakness, they go after it. A bully doesn't go after the linebacker on the football team. The bully goes after the weak kid on the playground. And so if Estonia punches back, I think they'll stop that.
Arthur, what do you think? If Estonia will punch back, so NATO is a NATO country, well, my native Latvia also, so say Baltic states, Baltic countries, punch back hardly, deliver a blow to the enemy, if there is a reason. Do you think that Putin will stop?
Well, there's no choice to him then, because Estonia has set up the plans to buy ammunition for the next 5 years. And in 2023, we as a very small Baltic nation were the biggest buyer of ammunition in all of Europe, a small Estonian Baltic country, right? So we are gearing up for big war. We don't want to attack first, but we're not going to wait until the tanks roll over the border. Satellite imagery shows a few months, perhaps half a year before Russia masses troops anywhere. So if there is a clear reason to believe these troops will come to Estonia, then we will eliminate them before they cross the border.
Oh, music to my ears, really. After that talks of escalations, whatever, gentlemen, let's just lean to a little bit and talk about these escalations. If you ask me, nobody asks me anyway, but if somebody would ever ask me about the escalation, I would say that all these talks about the escalation, whatever, crossing the red lines that Ukraine has crossed for the world already, you're just appeasing a monster. And he exactly, is that right? It doesn't work in no way. It never worked before. World War One, World War Two, and they're actually what some politicians are trying to do now is actually to make the World War Three closer with the talks of escalations. Am I right?
I would say 100%. I think that Putin has actually, let's give credit where credit's due. Putin has actually been masterful in deterring the West. And I hate to say that, but he has deterred the West. Biden is worried that if he allows Ukraine to strike into Russia, it'll escalate because he has this knee-jerk reaction that Biden is thinking that Putin thinks like Biden would think. And that's the core of the problem. Putin doesn't think anything like the way that Biden thinks. And so his calculus is all off. He has to think in terms of he's bluffing. I give this example quite frequently. So, and Arthur, tell me if this makes sense to you. So a guy has a grenade in his hand, or let's say he has one in his pocket. He goes into a bar. He gets into a fight in the bar. If he thinks he's tough because he has the grenade, he's not. He can't use that grenade in the bar. He will kill himself and everybody else in there, and that's going to be tragic, and it's not going to work. He has to fight conventionally. He has to be able to use his fists and swing bottles or whatever it is that he's doing in order to have that bar fight. That's what's going on right now. The U.S. couldn't use nukes in Afghanistan or Iraq. We had nukes, but we couldn't have used them. There was just, you're just not able to use those kind of weapons. That's where Putin is. But he can talk about it. Look at this. I have this grenade. You better back off. Well, it's going to kill you in the process, right?
Well, Zelensky is trying to influence, the United States internal affairs. Well, that's what at least Speaker Johnson thinks. He demands Zelensky remove Ukraine's ambassador to United States after Pennsylvania visit. Can you, gentlemen, do you know anything about what's going on? Why?
Arthur, I'm sorry.
Pennsylvania is... Sorry, what? Go on.
I know I just talked, but this is much more up my alley than Estonia. And but yes, so this
one goes to you, Professor. Sorry.
This is internal U.S. politics. The Republican Party is split. I'm a Republican, but I'm the old school Reagan Republican that looked at what happened with Ukraine and said, of course we should back them. That's different than the MAGA Republicans, the Trump-like Republicans who don't really want to be part of this. So so there's mixed messages here. One, there's some evidence that it seems to show that that the Republicans weren't invited, and there's some that seems to show that they were alerted to this. But I don't know that they really wanted to be part of that one way or another because of their constituency is so fractured. But now it's become a big internal domestic flap up, and we don't really want to. Okay, if you're Zelensky, you don't want to isolate either party. You want to be on good terms with both sides. You're not trying to influence the election because the look of trying to influence the election is going to go very badly for you. But they're making it a political point that Zelensky's trying to weigh in on one side of the election, where I don't believe that that's the case.
Well, exactly. Well, I mean, why? All right. Well, here's another part of the question. Let's take the back door. I'm going to go straight forward. Meeting. Why Trump wants to meet Zelensky? Is that right? Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, just out of the blue. Well, first of all, like a week ago, Trump is ready to trade literally a part of Ukraine for whatever the West calls peace or appeasement. It's not a peace, no, of course, but still. Now he wants to meet Zelensky. Why?
That's a good question. Trump is about Trump. And so, no, seriously, if you want to understand how Trump functions, you just understand that he will do what is in Trump's best interest. So he wanted to meet him, and then he didn't want to meet him, and now he wants to meet him again. Trump is an unpredictable wild card, but I don't think that he has Ukraine's best interest at heart. He has Trump's best interest at heart. And if that happens to coincide at some point, that could work out. But I don't see from his statements that he is actually wanting to support Ukraine in a meaningful way.
Gentlemen, this question goes to you both. Do you think there is, if I will be if somebody would ask me, I would have two policies ready, one for Trump, one for Kamala Harris, just in case, if I would be in charge of Ukraine. So who is in term? Do you really believe that Trump, if Trump goes receives all the power that the president of the United States has, he will just leave Ukraine without anything? Because he tends to, to be softer, to soften when he gets to actual power. But what happens to MAGA or to any Republican or Democrat, to anyone who actually feels the responsibility for that, because the accountability comes inevitably. Or am I wrong?
So, Arthur, I've been speaking too much. If you want to jump in, feel free.
This is more of a question to you again, because
Okay.
it's American internal politics. It's quite dangerous for me to talk about this.
That's fine. I'm fully fine with doing that. I just didn't want to keep going So what strategy I would have if I was Zelensky is
Yes.
to focus on Mitch McConnell, the leader, the Republican minority leader in the Senate, who has been a pretty strong supporter, and then the chairs of the House are actually pretty strong supporters, like McCall and others. The House Republican leadership below Johnson are actually pretty strong supporters, but Johnson, who is the speaker, controls the agenda, and so between Trump and Johnson, it's not working out so well. So if Trump got into power, I would say work on those leaders that are already with you, like McConnell, who can still try to push some bipartisan legislation.
All right. I'll take that as an answer. Question to you, Arthur. Kremlin says changes in Russian nuclear doctrine are intended as a warning to the West. I mean, what do you think, Arthur, as a military man and a man close to military and the man that does a lot for Ukraine? Is there any sense? I mean, okay, thank you, Captain Obvious. So, warning to the West. What kind of a warning? Another red line we're talking about here?
Putin's biggest export to the West has always been fear. For the last 20 years, 25 years almost, he has exported the paper tiger of his army, the idea. And if you are afraid of Putin, he has already won, because it is one of the most expensive and useful weapons, because it does so much in your mind. And we Estonians, we don't really have to be afraid or choose not to be afraid of the nuclear weapons, because we were deported by regular trains meant for animals. No nuclear technology about it, but a huge portion of the population was killed. So we know they can do so much more damage without even bringing the nuclear weapons into it. So we don't have the luxury to be afraid. Unfortunately, people in the West sometimes choose to be afraid, and that's giving Putin the card. So I would say it's the same play. I opened today a list of Putin's or Yeltsin's or Russian officials' nuclear threats to the West, and there has been well over 100. So it's an empty threat. It's another empty red line, and it's meant to export their greatest weapon, which is fear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But my question is now, is there any tool, is there an instrument that we can use to deliver that knowledge to the Western politicians? Or they sometimes just don't want to know it? Maybe the fear is more comfortable.
It's very hard to answer how to change that mindset, because Estonian experience comes through the past and through the deportations and shootings and red terror. In the West, it's a little bit different, because the Soviet Union was an enemy to be afraid, really. They were a nuclear superpower. They had armies to be ready to go like that. And the West remembers that fear. Most of the Western politicians were alive back then and remember that fear, and they automatically project that into nowadays. Russia and the Soviet Union are two completely different countries, but the fear in the West is the same.
We recently were talking to Matthew Sampson. He's a Marine Scout sniper, was sitting next to me in this very studio. We were discussing, he went to United States back, he was fighting in the trenches for Ukraine for more than 2 years. And I asked him, the last question I asked him, Matthew, what would you do if you would be the chief commanding officer of the Ukrainian army? Just let's speculate on that. And he gave me most the answer that unexpected answer, very unexpected, most unexpected. He said, if I would be chief commanding officer of Ukrainian army, Henry, what I would do is I would invest more money into propaganda than Putin does. And that would change the point of view of usual people in the West, because usual people in the West are actually living in a democracy. I know the Americans can, pick up the phone and call their senator or the governor and actually to talking. That's not the case actually in Russia. So that's the price of democracy. That's how democracy works. Investing in a propaganda. But my question is, how to fight Russian propaganda, to you gentlemen? Maybe more to you, Professor. Are there any tools? Do we have to deliver more propaganda, or there are, like more debunking propaganda? What is the best way?
So I'm more of a free speech guy than a lot of people would otherwise be. So I think taking RT off the air actually created a negative, a more negative effect than what they thought would happen. So you can still find RT. I watch RT to see what the other side's saying. Why are they saying what they're saying? And then I highlight it in some videos. They're saying this. Why are they saying that? Right? That's the way I approach it. But because it was taken off main channels, it went underground.
Right.
So RT started using what they did with tenant media, finding social media influencers. And now it's even more difficult to figure out who's doing what. But you need to be able to address those issues and confront them rather than just let them fester. And letting them fester is why I hear people say stupid things like, well, that's a regional war. It's not our problem. They've lost anyway, or whatever those things are. All the Russian talking points. When you know the Russian talking points, it's fascinating to hear people that repeat them. It's a pretty bizarre thing to watch, but we have to confront them. We can't just leave it alone. And so this idea of spending more time defeating those talking points with Ukraine's counterpoints, absolutely necessary. This is a battlefield that you just can't see.
Arthur, in Estonia, any Russian propaganda outlets that you can name? All closed? Nothing?
All closed, and similar to Zelensky's wise decision to ban the Russian Orthodox Church, which was met in the West by, ignorance and confusion. They thought it's a Christian church. We know it's a FSB power enlightenment structure. We didn't ban the Russian Orthodox Church, but the heads of the church were invited to the government. They were spoken to by the internal police just to show to the public that we have this dialogue. They know that we're watching them. We know we have this contact. So we are banning or isolating all of Russian cell structures of media and propaganda in Estonia. And we're watching them very closely.
Same thing in Latvia, but I was recently was in Latvia. I was in Daugavpils, I was in Liepāja. So I was talking to people and they didn't know that I'm working for Ukrainian state television. And these are clearly people that, waiters. They wait for Russia to come over and occupy the land and to make Latvia part of Russian, whatever they have in their heads, empire maybe. So this is some say this is a very simple question. You just have to take these people, send them away to Russia. Some say that we need to maintain some sort of a dialogue with these strong pro-Putin people. What do you think, gentlemen? Otto, please.
I don't think we can send them away just like that. I mean, you cannot fix any problem like that. Although I would love to do that, we cannot do that. It's not how the Western democracy and Western rules-based order works, and we have to follow these very same rules. Otherwise, we throw everything away that we fight for.
Right.
Communication, dialogue. They have rights, human rights. This is the very world we stand for, and if we throw it away, what is the point even? So unfortunately, if I like it or not, we have to give them this very same attitude that we want to be given to us in our countries. They're human, they have rights, they have passports, and we are communicating with them, letting them know that we see you, we talk to you, we see your rights, we're not deporting you anywhere, because this is not Soviet Russia, this is not Putin's Russia. And that's the difference.
a great answer, but these people are actually for Russian army to come over and to rape and to burn and do all the unimaginable deeds that I've seen with my own eyes in Bucha and Borodyanka. It's very hard for. I hope that I won't get to power one day because I very much agree with you, but I would send them away in the same animal wagons that you were talking about recently. This is wrong, but I just don't see any other way because these people are not talking to, not responding to Western values. I say, like, freedom is a core human value. They say whatever, and then just we wait.
Well, actually, Stalin saw Ukrainians and Estonians in much of the same way, that we need to kill one and deport the other. And he actually used the very methods you described. And how it worked out is that 3 generations later, Ukrainians have their own country and Estonians have their own country, both aspiring to be free. I mean, we are already part of the EU and NATO. It didn't work. It never works. It always produces the opposite effect of wanting to revenge, payback, even 100 years later. So we cannot use it.
Great answer. Thank you. Sorry for me pushing you to this answer, but I just love it. Professor,
so can I chime in here on this? So Professor Timothy Snyder from Yale, he makes the case that the best thing that could possibly happen to Russia is that they're defeated, because if they're defeated, they can shed their imperialistic mentality. Every empire that was defeated, like the British were defeated in America, or various European empires over time were defeated, and then they lost this idea that they can do this to their neighbors or to do this to their colonies or whatever else. And that would be the greatest thing that could happen positively to Russia. To, like, look at what happened after World War II. Japan is defeated. Japan plays nice with the rest of the world now. Germans were defeated. Germans play nice with the rest of Europe now. So it's just they need to go through that, and they haven't gotten to that place yet. And Ukraine needs to be the place where this happens, not just for them, but for the rest of the world.
Well, it's just 3 of us that understand that. Not, I mean, but tonight here in this very studio, of course, a lot of people understand that Russia has to go through some sort of a cultural revolution, a political revolution, or maybe first of all, it's a cultural paradigm. That's because imperialism is a cultural paradigm, and it has to get rid of it. But that's the post-Russia, whatever that will be. Just by the way, do you think that some sort of what kind of entity Russia will come after Ukraine wins, after the Ukraine victory, after any document is signed and the war is stopped? Do you think the Russia will just fall apart, or there will be South Korea and North Korea, something like that forever? Who's first?
So if you're talking to me, I don't want to interrupt because I didn't want to speak over. So I know some people are like, they want to see Russia dissolve. I get the people that want that kind of thing. I don't, for myself, I don't want to see that. I want to see them hold together long enough to pay reparations, to get Ukraine's children back, to get all those things in place to deal with it. Now, after that, if they want to do other things, hold referendums and see what parts of Russia want to, choose in a legally referendum to stay or go, that's immaterial to me. But they certainly need to be taken down a notch, like what happened after World War II to Japan and Germany. But I don't want them to turn into the Wild West. I don't want to see, some apocalyptic movie in there. That's not a good thing for anyone, especially with nukes floating around.
So it's like a lot of warlords with a lot of nukes on the market. This is what do you think that actually can happen in Russia? I don't think so. But Arthur, what do you think?
So
What is
when
going? Yeah.
it falls apart. Now, Arthur, you tell me what you think about this.
Yes.
When the end comes, I don't know that it'll come on the battlefield. I think there'll be a economic or political event in Russia that creates such instability that things fall apart very quickly. That's my read of what could happen. And if that kind of scenario happens, there could be all kinds of chaos. it depends on how quickly the system can regain control over itself. But that's my read of how things would end if it ends poorly for Russia. And I think that's not improbable. I think that could happen.
Yeah, it's very likely that the power structure changes from within. But the point is, usually, I mean, Yeltsin took power. He was part of the government at the Soviet times. When Putin took power, or Medvedev was president for a brief years, he was before a prime minister of Putin. So if we look at the men who Putin has surrounded himself with, many of them are a lot worse than him. He's one of the most stable guys in his 10-guy circle that he has, one of the most stable. I'm not praising him, but if we would have Patrushev or Prigozhin as Russian president right now, it would be a lot worse. So whoever comes next, if he's part of Putin's inner circle, it's really bad news for us. It's really bad news for Russia. And for anything bigger to happen is to dismantle the entire power structure as it is now, which is, I mean, now we're fully speculating. Whatever it is, I remember the 90s. It was a really turbulent times where in 1996 for Estonia and Russia, there was the biggest murder rate of the entire European area. So for 1,000 civilians, it was like mafia times. I think that will be coming back, and we are like building up a wall for that, so the violence wouldn't spread to Estonia.
Arthur answered your question, Professor.
Yeah, I'm wondering, as he was talking, I'm wondering, we saw all the corruption in the military because like it was somewhat more hollow than we thought. And like we thought that the Russian military, second best army in the world, is going to just roll right over, but they had significant problems. I'm wondering if even like at the nuclear level, are the nuclear weapons actually still functioning? Like we had the ballistic missile that blew up in the test, right? I hope that they have maintained these, but the corruption is pretty deep and systemic. So I'm wondering how much of a threat it actually is, or if it's somewhat hollow. And we don't want to find out the wrong way.
Exactly,
but
right. But I mean, yeah, well, that was exactly my question. So 6 out of 7 last new modernized, sort of a modernized missiles launches in Russia were not successful. As the Kremlin would say, this is a negative launch or whatever. I don't know. But still, we're laughing. Even one nuke can do a lot of damage and a lot of disaster and a lot of terror. But we in the West, I mean, should be assuming that Putin is capable of making nuclear threat and actually making it a reality. So this is why, to my opinion, the West should be actually forcing Ukraine to use long-range weapons to wipe off the air bases, the legitimate military targets. And this is not happening. Is that, again, the fear of escalation? And as soon as Zelensky visits the plant, it's like the tour was clearly a partisan campaign event designed to help Democrats in his clearly election interference, Johnson wrote in a letter to Zelensky. And Democrats like, wow. So,
it's not. He's been there so many times before. That's internal Republican party talking points, just like the Democrats are trying to find an advantage over Republicans. Republicans are trying to find an advantage over. That's domestic. That's not real. And anybody with half a brain understands that. So,
but my point was like how quickly and sensitive the matter gets when it's American. I mean, Zelensky's just signing the shells, the ammunition that this Pennsylvania plant was producing. But when we are in Ukraine, are actually sitting on a long-range weapons that can make Russia fall backwards immediately, like in a week time. So, leave Ukrainian territory. And the West is like deaf to these. Because if we are not allowed, if you want my opinion, let's say, please agree or disagree with the statement that I'm going to make. If Ukraine is not allowed to use long-range missiles and weapons right now, then the West would have to do it on its own in a way, way larger conflict. Am I right?
So
Yes,
theoretically,
I do think so.
go ahead.
I do think so, but it's connected. Yeah, the Western leaders being afraid of the losing of Russia, the dissolution of Russia, or they are afraid what Russia will become when they lose. But when you asked about a general or a military man, what would they do differently if they were the leader of Ukrainian armies right now? Then maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I would honestly say that I wouldn't do much differently. They,
Right.
as much as I see Ukrainian generals taking these decisions, and there are much criticism about that. They are slowly falling back by destroying as many Russians and their tanks and infantry fighting vehicles as possible. That's all you can do if you don't have air power, if you don't have artillery shells.
Well, here you
The
go.
only thing you can do is falling back very slowly, destroying the enemy as much as possible. It's like the only thing. And that's what they're doing. So I think they are destroying these targets that the West were supposed to destroy in the future. They're destroying them now, but it just costs a lot of Ukrainian lives.
Yeah, well, when someone asked me when I was in New York, why wouldn't Ukraine fight as per NATO doctrine, which made me, drunk a half glass of wine immediately more because we don't have, nothing in terms of NATO doctrine. We have nothing but manpower. We had nothing. Now we have some. Like it's when you have the weapon, the mean that can save your life, and you're not allowed to use it. Well, that's an excruciating hypocrisy to me. But let's say this is still is that anyway a question, Professor? This is a question to you. Do you think that the West will allow us to use this weapon after all, or not at all? This is like a matter of discussion, and that's it. We're going to discuss that forever.
Yeah, so you would have thought we'd be rejoicing over 8 billion, and 8 billion's not nothing, and that's a great thing. But I said yesterday, this is a consolation prize. The real prize that they needed to get was the permission to use these weapons to back Russia off, and they're not going to get it. Now, they're not going to get that, I think, because Biden has a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm not being partisan here either. This is just the way that he rolls. He has a knee-jerk reaction to not escalate. And he's being advised by Jake Sullivan and others who also have an allergic reaction to the idea of escalating. I think what they're going to try to do is kind of split the difference, and this is going to be costly in terms of Ukrainian lives, by helping Ukraine quickly get up to speed with building their own homegrown material. Part of that 8 billion was for their own weapons manufacture, because they don't want to be like talking about, well, we didn't do it, it wasn't us. They want to help Ukraine get up and running faster, but they don't want to have I was going to say the metaphor of blood on their hands, but they're going to have blood on their hands by not allowing Ukraine to do it. But they don't want to be implicated in this process by Russia, because they're looking to Russia's future. I think they're looking to, after the war, to what the reset's going to look like. They're looking toward just the larger picture, and it's short-sighted to be looking to that when right now you need to do this.
Arthur, do you think that there is always every cloud has a silver lining, and we've heard that Ukrainian army is already testing their new Palyanitas and everything, new missiles that can deliver a massive blow on the long range on its own. So when that happens, Russians would 100%, 134% is that what the Kremlin would have said, percent find, American microchips in that. They would anyway say that this is ATACMS and NASAMS and the HIMARS or whatever. So the point will come in time, and this is very, very, very near future, that Ukraine will deliver a blow on Russian air bases deep on Russian turf on its own. What do you think the West will say then, Arthur?
It's always been Russian internal propaganda. The truth is what they say it is, and nothing more. So Ukraine has hit targets 2,000 kilometers into Russia, which are closer to Estonia. Actually, a few hours from where I'm now is Russian border, and a few hours from there was the target of Murmansk airfield, and they hit that, and they have hit many more. Russians have their own versions about it, but it just goes to show again that it doesn't change anything. You can hit targets in Moscow, it wouldn't change because Ukrainians have done it. There's no escalation. Putin doesn't react to it at all because he has nowhere to escalate. He's not going to use nuclear weapons, and all of his army. Kursk, right.
Kursk and Kherson.
So
No one ever did that in 100 years, I believe so. Am I right, Professor? Am I right, Arthur? That will happen. And this is a hybrid operation of sorts. As I just talked to General Hodges about that, and he said, yes, exactly. This is a hybrid operation. This is militarily and politically.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard. It is. What do you think, by the way, Arthur? As a military man, what do you think about Kursk and Kherson? Was it worth it? And what actually Ukrainian army achieved? It's not over yet, but what in a month and a half of Kursk operation, Ukrainian army actually achieved? Do you think?
Ukrainians have achieved many, many huge things. First of all, their 15,000, something like that, big contingent has forced Putin to send about 60,000 in reserves and be held up on Russian territory, not looting and raping and killing in Ukraine. They're in Russian territory. That's a big victory for Ukraine because there is now 60,000 men less occupying Ukraine. Second of all, Ukraine showed that they can attack a nuclear power and occupy 1,000 square kilometers, which eliminated Western talks of ceasefire immediately, showing that this was a Russian talking point. That's number two. And number three, it showed that Ukraine has an ability to strike a big combined arms attack without Russia knowing about it. Those three big things, I mean, it's a massive success in my eyes. But unfortunately, a lot of people in the West just want to see huge, vast lands being deoccupied. So you don't have to do that to show that you're a very strong military. And I think Ukrainian are.
But those Russian soldiers can still loot in their own country, and they apparently are still looting in Kursk, which is absolutely bizarre to my mind, but this is how they roll. I want to. So
why, Professor? Pardon me for interrupting. Why do you think? Why this is bizarre? I mean, these people are criminals.
Yes.
To put it mildly, it's the army of criminals, and these people were, taken from prisons, from penitentiaries, and all over the Russia. These people actually ate people. They killed, they murdered, they raped. And they've been sent, and they've never been given weapons, and then now they are sent back to Russia. What do you think they would do? They would teach management or political science? No, they would do what they best do: kill and rape and everything.
What you've done in the past is your greatest predictor of what you're going to do in the future. That's just very common in my discipline, right? That's how we understand what, when you're hiring someone, for example. So they're going to go and do that. So they're doing that in Kursk. But my second point there was going to be that the Ukrainians have shifted the center of gravity from being on the defensive near Pokrovsk and just like, this isn't as terrible. We just keep getting backed up and backed up, which Arthur's right. That's what you have to do. You have to, you're ceding a little bit and attriting as much as possible in the meantime. But by doing this offensively, they really changed the conversation. They had as much of a political victory as they had a military victory there. And to expand that, once they get missiles that are able to do what the American and other Western missiles should be able to do that they can't do, it's going to change the narrative even more, because Russia is huge, but size is also a liability as much as it is an asset, right?
Right.
Because how do you defend every meaningful place within Russia from air? You don't have enough air defense to be able to do that. And whatever air defense you have is largely locked up by those Russian forces in Ukraine, trying to make sure that they're not in trouble, or right around the periphery, or in Moscow, in those kind of areas. So, and again, Arthur is the military guy. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but I see Russia as very, very vulnerable to attack once they have these weapons in place, in ways that they won't be able to stop, and that will give Ukraine an essential edge in what's going on. And Russia will not stop until they feel like they have to. They
Stops.
won't stop until they won't make peace until they feel like they're going to lose. So
I have nothing to add to it. Just to you only just look at the Kremlin and see that the losing Kursk and like more than 1,000 square kilometers is like a new normal. Who cares? Russia is big, and that's new normal on RT. That's new normal in the Kremlin. All right, that's the way we're going to deal with that. This is our land. We're going to get it back now. Let's get back to more proper agenda, whatever. So, let's see what happens then in Kursk. I am very excited about that. I'm very worried and very excited also. And that's it. Thank you so very much, gentlemen. A lovely conversation. We're running out of time, but certainly not out of questions, because there are millions of questions, and there are millions of questions. Well, all right, 10 more questions. But Arthur, to you, thank you so very much, dear friend. I know that you both did a lot for Ukraine. And Arthur, you are loved here. Trust me. Exactly. Right here in UATV English and in Ukraine, you're always welcome. Professor, same to you. For your knowledge, thank you, and for your time and for your expertise. We appreciate that a
glad to
lot.
be here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Goodbye.